And we're also still involved in helping a lot of people that have been impacted. Our past Vice President, Hector Flores, got together with Coca-Cola's bottling company, and we've been distributing water to families across Texas that have been impacted by the storm and are still out of water. In fact, there's an article in the morning news today that there are in Victory Park, Victory Meadows, right? There are still people without water right now, today. Okay? So we're still being out there delivering water, delivering supplies to those that need it if we can. So with that being said, bear with us as we move forward and continue our program again. For those of you who don't know, our Chorizo and Menudo breakfast has been around since 1992. We meet once a month, the first Saturday of every month, and we try to bring people that are important to the community, whether it's in politics, in culture, in art, in just community activists, stories that impact us from day to day. So, and they can vary from Vanessa Guillin's mother, who contacted us, said, I lost my daughter, I don't know what happened to her. And, you know, we got involved, and we unfortunately found out that she had been, murdered. But we found her body, and LULAC was able to change the military status in terms of how to deal with harassment of primarily female soldiers, but others. And we continue to do that day after day after day after day, everywhere, with all our LULAC councils. So for those of you who don't know about LULAC, I'll just rephrase. We're the oldest Latino civil rights organization in the country, founded in 1929 in Corpus Christi. We're the largest Latino civil rights organization in the country, with over 400,000 members throughout the United States and Puerto Rico. And we continue to be active and moving things forward. And I'm glad that we're here in Dallas moving with our Chorizo and Menudo breakfast. So this time what I'd like to do is start the program. I see that, that we have several people around here. Our former sheriff, Lupe Valdez. Constable Orozco over here in the back. Grand Prairie School Board member Brian Barra. I'm sure I'm missing some more. Just send it in and we'll continue. Our first speaker today is Ernest Gonzalez. He's the Assistant Attorney General for the Eastern District of Texas. He's a graduate from University of Texas at San Antonio with a bachelor's degree. He then went to my alma mater, Thurgood Marshall School of Law, where he graduated with his law degree. And he's been an Assistant Attorney General in the Western District in Del Rio. He's also worked as an Assistant DA in Bexar County. And now he might become the new, maybe, U.S. Attorney for the Northern District. Let's give a big hand. Ernest Gonzalez.
Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to speak as loud as possible. Mr. Garcia indicated, my name is Ernest Gonzalez, and I'm an Assistant United States Attorney in the Eastern District of Texas. And we went over my qualifications of how I came to be an Assistant United States Attorney. But more specifically, as an Assistant United States Attorney, I am the lead Assistant United States Attorney in a section that's called the Organized Drug and Crime Task Force, Drug Enforcement Task Force, or OSADF. Some of my law enforcement colleagues that are here will recognize what the OSADF program is. The OSADF program is designed to target the largest domestic criminal organizations as well as transnational criminal organizations. So that's what I'm tasked with, and as the lead, I'm responsible for 7 other attorneys, 7 other Assistant United States Attorneys in my office that are responsible for similar activities of investigating large criminal organizations as well as large transnational organizations. We prosecute cases internationally from the United States all the way to Colombia. We frequently travel to those nations: Mexico, Colombia, Guatemala, Panama, Ecuador, going after or investigating cases that affect our community. So you may ask yourself, why do that? Why go international? And why go after these individuals in those countries? Because eventually their activities there affect our community here. And so we go after them wherever we can find them, and because of the big impact that they may have in our community. Personally, where did I come from? I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. My parents were immigrants to the United States. They originally came and came to California and were field workers in California for several years. Eventually, they moved to Texas and raised a large family. I have 6 siblings. All of us graduated from college. Some of us have postgraduate degrees and have lived in Texas all our lives. I joined, well, my first career was that of an accountant. I was an accountant in San Antonio for several years. Then I went to law school, graduated from law school, went to work at the Bexar County District Attorney's Office, and I worked there for several years as a prosecutor. And then eventually I joined the federal prosecutors and became an assistant United States attorney in the Western District, and I was in Del Rio, Texas for 4 years, and then eventually came to the Eastern District of Texas where I'm at now. The Eastern District of Texas has offices, well, the primary office is in Beaumont, but it has offices in Tyler, it has offices in Sherman, it has offices in Plano, it has offices in Texarkana, and it has offices in Lufkin. I office out of the Plano office. Now, what do I do on a day-to-day basis, and how does it impact our community? On a day-to-day basis, as I indicated, we go after the baddest of the baddest. We go after the individuals that are involved in large-scale drug trafficking. What does that involve? It involves charging them and seeking them to charge them with conspiracy to traffic illegal drugs. And that means whether they're doing it domestically or whether they're doing it internationally. So what I would tell you, what we're seeing, the trends that we're seeing and what we're seeing here locally, the types of drugs that are coming into this country, or large amounts of drugs that are coming into this country, are what you hear on TV. Methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl. But what we primarily see, or the one that we see primarily in this area, or our local community, is methamphetamine. We see large quantities of methamphetamine coming into our community, and that's who we target. The cartels in Mexico, the large cartels in Mexico, are sending large quantities of drugs to the United States, so that's who we target. We look at the leaders of the particular cartels that are doing that. For methamphetamine, the primary source for that is a cartel that's situated in Michoacán, Mexico. That is the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, otherwise known as CJNG. That is the cartel that is sending millions and millions of dollars of methamphetamine to this area, and it affects our community and causes all kinds of violent acts and crimes. The other cartels that we deal with on a regular basis, the Sinaloa cartel, which is also involved in methamphetamine, but is primarily involved with cocaine. Same there. The cocaine is entering the United States. It originates in Colombia. It is shipped to other nations, Central American nations. That affects those communities in Central and South America, causing what you see on TV, the immigrant crisis, where some of those individuals are fleeing those areas in order to get away from the violence that are generated by the cartels. As I stated, these organizations are in these foreign countries. We go to these foreign countries to seek out these organizations and prosecute these organizations, the cartels that are in Mexico. We work with the prosecutors and the governments in those countries to try to extradite those individuals to this country to stand charges for their importation of drugs. These organizations have become more and more sophisticated. They now use the web, social media. They use platforms to communicate that they believe can't be intercepted or investigated by law enforcement. So we too have to get sophisticated in the means that we use to go after them. For example, if an individual here in this community wants to distribute cocaine, the cocaine starts in Colombia. It's produced in Colombia. It's then shipped through South America and eventually through Mexico to the United States. But there's a whole process that occurs in that shipment of drugs from that country. And we seek out to prosecute the individuals that are involved in that shipment of drugs, starting from Colombia, from the producers all the way to the distributors here in the local community that are causing acts of violence in our local community. In a typical transaction from drugs from Colombia, the producer will send the drugs to Venezuela. Venezuela has now become, because of the chaos in Venezuela, has become one of the transshipment points. Because of the Maduro regime there, the Maduro military has been working with the drug producers, the cocaine producers. Then the cartels in Mexico go and pick up the drugs in Venezuela and ship them to other countries. For example, one of the countries that's another transshipment point is Guatemala. The drugs leave Venezuela, they go to Guatemala. The Mexican cartels, specifically the Sinaloa and CJNG, are dominating that area, and they dominate the communities there. And the drugs reach there, then they ship them through Mexico to the border, causing havoc in those communities that they dominate. So that's what we're seeing. Those are the trends that we're seeing. That's what we're prosecuting, or that's what I, on a day-to-day basis, prosecute and go after. We've also seen, and I don't know if you all saw last week, I was on the media because there was, the cartels are now using private airplanes that they're purchasing in the U.S. to transport drugs. So you ask yourself, how can a cartel in Mexico purchase an airplane registered in the United States, then use it to transport drugs? Because the law permits it. The FAA and the law permits a foreign national, anybody born in a foreign country, to register a plane in the United States, as long as they put that plane in a trust. So there are trust companies here in the United States that allow these planes to be registered, and then they ship those planes to Mexico, which are then used to fly to Venezuela, pick up shipments of cocaine anywhere from 1,200 kilos to 2,000 kilos. And then they fly those planes to Guatemala. They land those planes in clandestine runways, and then they torch them. They destroy the planes, because the plane is the cost of doing the transportation. What's valuable in that shipment is the $50 million of cocaine, not the plane. The plane is destroyed. It's left there, and it's destroyed so that investigators can't follow up on the evidence of that particular plane. So we, in this particular investigation that was announced last week, we targeted the trust company that was allowing these planes to be put in trust in the name of these individuals who were operating for the cartel, which was the Sinaloa cartel and the CJNG cartels. So in doing that, we were going after the root of the problem, which is these companies or trust companies that are allowing these planes to be shipped to foreign countries to then be used to transport drugs to Guatemala and eventually into the United States, all along the way, causing havoc amongst the citizenry, both in Guatemala and here, causing individuals in Guatemala to leave their homes to then come to the border between the United States and Mexico. And you can see the crisis, the so-called crisis on the border with immigrants coming from those countries.
I just hadn't seen it.
So,
yeah, for sure.
on a day-to-day basis, that's what we do, that's what I do, that's what we prosecute, and that's what we look to do in order to better our community. These other criminal organizations, they also are involved not only in the drug trafficking part of it, but in the smuggling of humans and people. They are involved in bank fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. You see individuals that are involved from other nations. What we've seen here lately is a trend for Chinese criminal organizations to operate in Central and South America. They have become individuals that are involved in the laundering of money from the United States to these foreign countries. They are in those countries. They are also providing the necessary chemicals to make the methamphetamine that is then shipped into our country. So that's what we're seeing. Those are the entities that we're going after, whether it be in China, whether it be in Colombia, whether it be in these South and Central American countries. That's pretty much what we do on a day-to-day basis. The cases we present are presented in Plano, are presented in Sherman. Those are the district courts that I present cases to and that I'm involved with. Those are the activities that we do on a day-to-day basis. On a yearly basis, we'll probably conducting at least 10 to 12 jury trials. So we're involved heavily in prosecuting these individuals and conducting jury trials and getting them convicted and sentenced within the judicial system of the United States.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
Something from your primo over here.
I'm the oldest guy here, I think. Mr. Gonzalez, the question that I have, I'm sure that you were impacted by the recent energy outages that we had. And I understand now that a lot of the entities that were supposed to protect us here as Texans and as residents did not do their job to the point of negligence, to the point of even deaths. Does this rise to the level of criminality?
It does. If there's
And does the U.S. Government, are they going to do something about it? Is it possible? Who has to initiate, I guess, any action on our part to get this ball rolling? Just a question.
Yes, if there is any kind of overcharging or any kind of abuse in taking advantage of the community by overbilling of any service, that they're now trying to overbill you to receive the service in order to make a repair at your house, or to overcharging you in any kind of utility bill. If that is referred over to the U.S. Attorney's Office by one of the federal agencies that is responsible for overseeing that particular aspect of investigation, we will pursue prosecution if any federal laws have been violated.
Over here.
Thank you.
As a LULAC member and LULAC breakfast, I know we're trying our best to be more compassionate with the immigration. You mentioned, what was it, Guatemala? Or no? Okay. So how is, because of the context of different media, how do you talk about that? How's the Western discussion when it comes to cartel, Honduras, Nicaragua, Central America, and immigration?
Well, what we do is we prosecute those individuals that are trying to take advantage of those individuals that find themselves in a difficult position because they're in the country and these cartels are taking over their properties or forcing them into basically slave labor or servitude to these cartels to help them distribute their drugs. So we go after the individuals that are taking advantage of these individuals. And the cartels in Mexico have also diversified, as I indicated, have gotten involved into alien smuggling or human smuggling as well. So we go after them for those reasons as well. They're involved in that type of activity and taking advantage of these individuals. Either to force them to work in the drug trade or charging them to smuggle them into the United States and housing them and then basically holding them for ransom for family members to pay a certain amount in order to get them released.
Two years ago, there was a big investigation on DFW. There was a lot of trafficking in DFW. What has it changed since then? Are they raised? I was surprised. They said so much drugs are coming through workers through DFW. Have they increased the investigation or the screening when it comes to DFW international, especially international flights?
It has. It has increased, especially after 9/11. Their investigative techniques have gotten more intense. So yes, it has been solidified so that there's more interdiction of drugs coming into the United States. Now, there are drugs that are being shipped, again, as I mentioned earlier, drugs coming in from China. Obviously, there are, I don't know if you're familiar with fentanyl.
60 Minutes did the story on it.
Fentanyl. Fentanyl is a very serious drug. It can kill you almost immediately upon touching it. And the Mexican cartels are producing it. They're producing it and they're putting it in combination with other drugs that they're importing into the United States in order for the person who uses the drugs to have a more significant effect. Luckily for us, the fentanyl that we're seeing in this area is not as great as we're seeing in other areas of the country, specifically up in the Northeast, in Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey. They are having many overdoses, and they classify them as opiate overdoses, but a lot of them are attributed to fentanyl. But a lot of the fentanyl that's coming into this country is being brought in via shipments from China. So back in a year ago, the Chinese government did This fentanyl now is a prohibited substance, but there is still fentanyl being shipped in from China. Great to go. Yes, Mr. President?
Yeah. Thank you for being here and being as open as candid. Would you expand a little bit on the human trafficking? We understand that the North Texas area is one of the highest sex trafficking communities. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that if you would, please.
Sure. And as I indicated, we have a specific section in our U.S. Attorney's Office that deals specifically with human trafficking and sex trafficking, as well as child exploitation. So we have several prosecutors that are assigned to do that specific task. We also have prosecutors that are general prosecutors that prosecute those types of cases as well. But again, what we do is we target the individuals that are victimizing those particular individuals. What we've seen, or the trend that we've seen, especially in this area, we've seen Chinese criminal organizations as well as the cartels involved in that type of activity. So we go after the individuals in the cartels that are doing this, and in regards to the Chinese, we're seeing that they're doing a similar activity, and they're more involved in the sex trade, where you see massage parlors being operated by these Chinese criminal organizations and using these females that they bring into this country and force them to work in these parlors in order to pay off their transportation costs.
How do you collaborate with local law enforcement?
Well, in any case that we work hand in hand with local law enforcement, whether it be DPD, whether any local law enforcement in our area. A lot of the cases that we handle originate with the local law enforcement. And the reason that we join forces with them is because, one, the federal government has more resources, and the federal government is able to go beyond the confines of the borders of where the local officers can go. We can go internationally, we can go state to state, where a local PD may not be able to do that. So it makes sense to bring more resources to the fight and to be able to expand an investigation, for example, in smuggling ventures, where they may have found, the local law enforcement DPD may have found that this is occurring. They come to the federal prosecutors or the federal investigators so that we can expand that investigation and get to the root of the problem, whether it be in Mexico, all the way into Mexico, all the way into Guatemala, all the way into China.
All right, one last question, we're gonna move on.
Based on your personal history, you may have a bias toward law enforcement. I have several members that are law enforcement officers, and I support law enforcement until I get a ticket. But lately, a lot of press has been on public officials criticizing federal law enforcement, questioning their integrity. So I'd love to hear someone that's in that department talk about that, share about that, how they feel. And then has your personal history, has any bias that you have ever affected your role in what you're doing? That have you any challenges so that we know that who you are, you're doing your job in the legal way, or you're doing the job in the right way, and stuff like that. So I just want to share how you feel, what's going on right now when people are questioning whether to trust somebody in the federal legal community.
You know, and I understand that is an ongoing conversation, but it's like any other profession. There's going to be good people and bad people. There's going to be people that follow the letter of the law, and there's going to be some that are corrupted. And as a federal prosecutor, we're the entity that prosecutes the individuals that are corrupted, that do commit criminal acts. That's one of our responsibilities, to prosecute all the corruption. So, in answer to your question, we do that, and we do prosecute the individuals that are not doing what they should do, and they abuse their position. Because it's an entrusted position, just like the position that I have. It's an entrusted position on me to uphold the Constitution of the United States. We take a sworn oath to do that, and everybody should be held to that same standard. When you violate that, then you should be prosecuted, just like any other criminal that violates the Constitution or the laws of this country. So we do that, and we do. And I have prosecuted individuals, police officers, politicians, public authorities, for doing exactly that, for violating the laws that they're entrusted to uphold.
Thank you. We gotta move on. Gracias. A lot of y'all have been worried, wondering what's going on with the schools. Are they safe to go back to schools? Are the teachers being vaccinated? Are the kids going to be up to be vaccinated and things like that? And here in Dallas, it's actually been ongoing for a while, so I thought it was important that we, as we start our Chorizo Menudo breakfast again, live, that we somebody talk about education, what's happening. So our next speaker is got her bachelor's from the University of Denver, has a master's from the University of Colorado. She was a superintendent for Denver Public Schools. Now she's the assistant superintendent here in Dallas. Let's give a big hand to Susan Cordona.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. That's a hard act to follow. I felt like I was watching an episode of Narcos as we were listening to that. So I'm going to ask you maybe to change the channel, and we'll start like something a little bit tamer. But even as I was listening, I was thinking, you know, the more we can do in our school system, the less likely it is that our kids end up in what we just heard. And it is so important that we are all working together around our students. And I want to share just a little bit about myself and what brought me to Dallas. I'm just 2 months into my time here. As you just heard, I'm from Little D, Denver, making the transition to Big D, Dallas. I spent my entire career in the Denver Public Schools. So 31 years, I graduated from the Denver Public Schools, was a teacher, was a principal, had a lot of different roles in our central support teams, and then most recently was the superintendent in the Denver Public Schools. This past fall, Dr. Hinojosa gave me a call. I had gotten to know him about 5 years ago, and asked me to think about coming to Dallas. And it was the right time in my life. My kids are big, my daughter's in college. I could retire from my school system and reinvent myself here in this beautiful city, and I've just loved every minute of my time so far in Dallas. And I want to share with you part of the reason why I think it's so important. And sometimes I think you can't actually see what's happening when you're in a place. It just looks like the way things are. And what you need to know is the way things are happening here in Dallas ISD is not the way things are happening around the country. We are so much farther ahead here than in other places that I don't even think we realize how special this place is. There are parts of the United States where just this week students are beginning to go back into school, and other places where kids still are not in school. And when I walk into schools, I've probably visited 30 schools so far in my time here over the last 2 months. Instruction is happening. Kids are in school, teachers are working. I'm so impressed with the quality of our teachers and our school leaders. And there really is focus on what it is that we can do to accelerate learning for many of our students who have been so impacted by the COVID pandemic. I think it is really important. This week is really the anniversary of the year. This week coming up is when most of our school districts moved into virtual instruction. And a year later, it's hard to believe, like, if I look back to a year ago, I never could have imagined that we would be in the position that we're in right now. So I want to talk about 3 things that we're doing in Dallas ISD that I think are really important. Work that we're doing with our students, work that we're doing with our teachers, and then work that we're doing with the community. So first, for our students. The good news is our schools are incredibly safe. The rates of COVID within our schools is significantly lower than it is within the community. I have yet to go into a building where I don't see everybody using a mask, where there's not social distancing, but there really is instruction happening. I think that's really, really important for our students. But we know that many of our students really have lost significant time in instruction. There are a few things that we have underway already that I think are going to make a big difference. We have a project to bring cellular towers onto our schools that will give our students free access to internet service in their homes. That's a real game changer. We've already gotten out computers and hotspots to our students, but being able to have that directly in home will make a huge difference in terms of the ability for kids to tap in to the internet, not just for virtual learning, but really to empower their learning 24 hours a day when they're in school or when they're at home. We're working on additions for next year, including more after-school programming, more tutoring, and in many of our schools, an extended calendar that will add significant learning time to the school year because we know our students really need that. So there's a lot of work focused on our students. I want to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing with our staff, and I'm incredibly impressed as I transition in to see the focus on racial equity within the district, the focus on ensuring that we have a diverse workforce, that we have people who look like our students in front of them in the classroom, in our school teams, and real emphasis on how is it that we develop pipelines so that teachers can become leaders, leaders can become principals, principals can move up within the system. So a real focus on how we support a diverse workforce around racial equity. And then the last thing I wanted to share that I've been so impressed with is the work that we're doing in the community. And just this past week we were able to share with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce work that we're doing around our bond. When I said little d to big D, I was really proud in the Denver Public Schools. We passed a bond initiative this past November, just about the biggest bond that we've ever done. It was just about $800 million. I get here, and y'all passed a $3.2 billion bond. That is no joke, that is no small feat. And we want to make sure that the entire community, particularly our MWBE contractors, have the opportunity to participate in those projects that are coming out of the bond. One of the things that we've done is we've created a bond academy. And this bond academy has invited smaller contractors, some of whom are not yet bonded, some of whom are bonded but want to grow their bonding capacity, to participate in an academy over the course of several weeks. They will go through a whole series of classes that will help them learn how to bid on contracts, how to get bonded. At the end of it, they'll either be fully bonded or able to increase their bonding capacity so that we can ensure that we are, in fact, using the funding that comes from Dallas with contractors who are reflect the students that we serve here at Dallas. And so it really just has been a tremendous pleasure to join Dallas ISD. I'm actively in the market both for a house, for a home, and for friends. And so when I got the invitation to come here today, I was delighted. This is such a valuable organization to support our students, and so really pleased to be able to spend some time with you.
All right, it's our first question.
Buenos días, thank you for being here. Ana Coca, Grand Prairie Council President. I'm also a bilingual teacher, bilingual certified teacher. I've been in education for over 25 years. We have lost a lot of bilingual teachers due to COVID. My question is, Dr. Ken Scribner, the superintendent from Fort Worth, he posted that all Fort Worth ISD employees can get their COVID vaccine from Texas Health when they sign up by 3 o'clock today. Is Dallas or Dr. Hinojosa doing something similar for all of the ISD teachers?
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, that's really, really important. And particularly because we have teachers who have been working in person, so focused on students, it is really important that we prioritize teachers around COVID vaccinations. So Dallas ISD has been partnering with Parkland. All classroom teachers can sign up through Parkland, and we're prioritizing teachers first before people from central office because we want to make sure that our teachers who are interacting with students have that access to vaccinations through Parkland. We also have a partnership through CVS where people can sign up through CVS to go ahead and get vaccinated.
Brian, and then over here.
Ms. Cordova, I want to start off by saying welcome to Dallas.
Thank you.
Definitely exciting to have you in Dallas ISD. My question to you is, as an assistant principal, any idea on what next year is going to look like? Is it going to? Are we switching to full on in person? Are we going to continue with virtual or the hybrid model, virtual and in person?
Yeah, so thank you. And so for next year, our goal is to absolutely welcome all kids back into as normal conditions for school as possible. And part of the reason we know we want to do that is we know kids, the vast majority of kids learn best when they can be in person with their teachers, with their friends, and with all of the support systems that schools can offer. We also know that because of virtual learning, some students really have thrived in virtual learning. I've heard from many families, particularly families of students with special needs, that they actually found a supportive environment in virtual learning. There's less sort of stigma on asking for help in virtual learning. So in addition to opening up all of our schools, we do have plans to open up an all virtual school for families who want that for their children. And so we really are looking at how is it that we can serve the vast majority of kids who really need in-person schooling, but still have an option for a virtual academy for kids who want that. I think we were going to go there to the gentleman in white.
Howdy, Bill Benson, retired teacher from this feeder pattern.
Awesome.
In Quintanilla over here.
Yes.
But the reason I'm talking, what you're saying sounds wonderful. But before you got here, the National Assessment for Educational Progress showed that our 8th graders fell to the lowest level in like 6 years. Are y'all looking, because that'll be next year's test, are you doing anything to help change that so we catch back up with the nation?
Sure, yeah, so thank you. And so for those of you who don't know, the NAEP test, the National Education Assessment Program, is generally called the Nation's Report Card. And it's an assessment that is given all over the United States to get a snapshot of how school districts are doing. And something that I think is actually really exciting is there's just been a recent study that looks at what kind of growth should you expect from students, and how well do they do against that expectation. And while we might have seen a dip in NAEP scores, Dallas is actually one of the school districts that's getting more growth, more progress, when you look at NAEP scores than people would typically expect. And so there is good news in that. But we know that, you know, with the interruptions from last year, particularly for our older students, we have far more students, particularly in high school, who are in hybrid. We need to be focused on how we accelerate learning. It's part of the reason why we're looking at extended calendars for elementary and middle school students. We also are looking at tutoring programs where we can help accelerate for our high school students when they are behind, so that we can help them catch up.
Mr. Grover, nice to meet you from Colorado, but I'm a middle school math teacher for 25 years now in Houston and Dallas, but I emphasize the math part. We know about Stanford University's research, we know about NWEA research, math stuff. The kids that are going 6 months a year, minimal 6 months, possibly a year behind at this point. We know that nationwide or Texas-wide, you have a typical about 5% dropout rate. I'm a math guy. And look at the 10% that are not coming to school. You could easily, this is anywhere from 10, I'm not exaggerating, from 10 to 20% of the students have gone at least 1 full year behind where they were before.
Yeah.
How are you going to, looking at all the programs you have, how are you going to make up for that? Because Dallas IC is the big and urban school district in North Texas. How are you going to help those kids that could possibly have already taken themselves out of a college career or a future career? How are you going to make up for that in the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, so thank you. It's really serious. This is probably the largest educational crisis that we will experience in our lifetime.
Yes.
And I think it is really important that we work not just in the school district, but as a community to focus on how critical this crisis is. Let me talk about high school in particular. We know that for high school students, remediation doesn't work. We need to think about acceleration. So that's really important. That's a lot of the work that we're doing with supporting teachers is how do you accelerate when kids are behind? Seems like it doesn't make sense, but there's a lot of research around that. The other thing that we're really focused on is how do we help students see a pathway for themselves that may lead to college, may lead directly into the workforce. So our career institutes, where students in English and in Spanish are able to work on certificates that will help them get high-wage jobs immediately out of high school. Our P-TECH programs, where kids, our goal is to have 73% of our students in P-TECH programs graduate with a high school diploma and an associate's degree. We're very close to hitting that even in this year. And so it really is about how do you help students, even when they've been behind, see that they can be successful. One of the things that I would encourage you all to do, if you have any family or friends who have high school students, check with them. Are they going to school every day? It is not too late. Just the week before the storm, I was out knocking on doors to help kids understand, even if you think that you are too far behind to catch up, we need you to come back to school.
All right, Andrew goes for, he's a former teacher.
Okay.
Thank you for doing such a fine job in our school, Dr. Holt. I was a community liaison for 25 years in drug intervention. Having said that, I'm going to change the channel. Methamphetamine is running rapid in Dallas, Iowa. And I remember in the 90s, we used to have campaigns for young people against poverty and health. I know that situation of personal education. When we go back, God willing, when we go back to school in the fall, if we go full force, are you thinking about putting any money in the budget for drug intervention, prevention, so we could stop the spread of methamphetamine in the schools? Because we used to have a wonderful program, and there's no more program.
Yeah, so thank you. I am going to make sure that I try to follow up on that. My short answer is I don't know, but I'm happy to look into it to see. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, while students are in school, middle school in particular, really for gangs, for drugs, the most important time to intervene is not high school. It's with our 4th and our 5th graders right before they get to middle school. And I actually don't know enough about what we're doing in that space. This year has been so unusual that we really have just been focused on how do we get kids in school, how do we keep them healthy, how do we keep them safe. So I haven't actually heard anything about that, but I'll follow up. I'd be more than happy to follow up on that. Thank you. Great.
Thank you very much.
We passed a bond program for $3.7 billion here in 2020. The question is, I'm very impressed with the program that's been started to make sure that Hispanic-owned construction companies are able to compete and get bonding through an academy that you have. Now, I understand about 14 schools are going to be built or more, and some are going to be upgraded. I think our community also should benefit from any bond program that's putting taxes in. That's why I think it's critical. And I think it's an important question to somebody in your category, in your position.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I couldn't agree with you more. With this first Bond Academy class that we have, the vast majority of the people participating are Hispanic-owned businesses. And I think that's really important that we're supporting and building that pipeline of contractors who can get these jobs, not just as subs.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, our next guest is started his career as a regular police officer on the beat in San Jose, California. He worked his way up to assistant chief and then became the chief of San Jose, California police chief. He is now the first Latino police chief in the history of Dallas. Eduardo Eddie Garcia, Alanca Garcia, Clark.
Good morning, still. Buenos días, ¿cómo estamos? Si empiezo a hablar en español un poquito rápido porque soy puertorriqueño, so hablo más Eddie Garcia, very proud to be standing in front of you here today. Just a little bit about myself, born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, moved directly to San Jose. Yes, we bypassed New York City and went directly to San Jose. When I was young, you know, one of the dynamics with me and my family and I both, you know, we all learned how to speak English when we were in San Jose. Interesting story when we were in San Jose when my mom at one point asked some teachers, you know, how myself and my sister were doing in school. The teacher looks at my mom and she goes, well, you know what, they'll never be at the head of their class, but they'll be okay. And I laugh because in 2016, when I became the chief of police for the city of San Jose, my mom in the audience, I was raised by a single mom after the age of 12. She's my hero. We're moving mommy out here this summer. So I need my mom to make me some good old-fashioned Puerto Rican meals. Moving her out here. But I remember telling her right away, hey mom, I think we made it to the top of the class today. So it was a great point for us. Sheriff Valdez. We sat together at a Major City Chiefs conference, I don't know if you remember that, in Washington, D.C. a few years ago. It's great to see you. Great to see you. So, you know, one of the dynamics and the things that I said in 1990, I'm aging myself, in 1991, when I first applied to the San Jose Police Department, as I said, you know, what a beautifully diverse community like San Jose is, very similar to Dallas, that if you were a stranger here, if you don't know how to speak the language, doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what you look like, I'll understand because I was there. I very much understand that. One of the dynamics with police work coming through the city of San Jose, I've worked most every unit. I worked narcotics enforcement, I was on our SWAT team, I worked in homicide, I worked vice and criminal intelligence, I commanded the investigations bureau, I worked administration in charge of hiring, I was an executive assistant for 3 years. Before that I was police chief for 5 years in San Jose. I was very proud of that. There's only one reason I'm standing in front of you, one reason only, is because of the work that the men and women of the San Jose Police Department did in order for me to be here. It's not because of me, it's because of the work that the men and women do. And that's just the leadership qualities I think that we all need to have in our people. So, coming to Dallas, I'll tell you this, I never thought I would wear another patch on my arm. I thought I was going to retire out of San Jose, but when I retired in San Jose, I was always going to come to Dallas. There was never a reason. I know a lot of you probably know, but I was probably the biggest Bay Area Cowboy fan we had. I was a Cowboy fan in the mid-70s before I spoke English. And I've been out to our beautiful city on many an occasion to take part in a Cowboy game, and always fell in love with the community. You know, a couple years ago when I was at Major City Chiefs Conference, I talked to a good friend of mine named Kurt Putney, who at the time was the chief of police of Charlotte Mecklenburg. And I told him, hey, you know what? This was 2 years ago. If that Dallas job ever opened, that'd be something I'd be interested in. And I think we could all say that at times we're put on this earth, God puts us on this earth for a reason. I announced my retirement from San Jose at almost out for nearly 30 years, and a month later this job opened up. So I'm like, okay, someone's telling me something. I didn't put in for this job not knowing the issues that face us in Dallas. I know we have a lot of issues, not only with the backdrop, nationally, state, and locally, with police and community relationships and social justice reforms and what we need to do, but also obviously with the backdrop of we have a violent crime problem in our city that we need to fix. Okay, that we need to fix. My strategy, I teamed up with criminologists. I've worked with criminologists in San Jose before. One of the dynamics that we go through a lot of times, I always wondered why we hadn't worked in the city with criminologists about let's get plans together that show empirical data that they work. Okay, so there's a three-prong effect, three-prong approach that we're taking. The last part is one of the most important parts because it's long-term. But obviously we need to concentrate and focus our efforts using data being driven in our violent crime areas in the city. The data will tell you, and any police officer that's worked longer than 3 years will tell you that what I'm about to tell you, that they can back up with their anecdotal information, but generally speaking, about 20% of addresses and individuals cause 80% of the problems in neighborhoods. It's not a far, wide-reaching thing. There's specific individuals, specific locations that cause the issues that we have in our city. So we need to concentrate and focus our efforts on that. Secondly, we need to disrupt criminal enterprises. We know when criminals that prey in our communities, where they meet, what they're doing. That a lot of times in Dallas are our drug houses, open air drug dealing in areas of those concerns. We're going to be very active in those areas, and we're going to be rooting out that criminal element. The last piece is so I break this up into two things, weeding and seeding. Okay? Police departments are no longer judged by success or failure as to simply lowering crime rates. If those crime rates are lowered at the same time the community trust is lowered, then that's not success. So we have to equally work just as hard in community outreach and making sure our community trusts us as we are with taking the criminal action. Thank you. So one of the plans, or in the early 90s, and I'm going to keep using the term, and it's interesting because I had a conversation with Congresswoman Johnson yesterday. And I said, we talked about the Weed and Seed program. Well, in the early 90s, there was a program, a federal grant program called Weed and Seed. And what it was exactly what I'm about to tell you, that it gave funding for us to be able to weed the criminal element out of our neighborhoods, but then there was funding to piggyback that to then plug positivity into our neighborhoods. And I love the fact she wrote it right down, and on Monday she said she's going to look into it. But regardless of that, the term weed and seed is what we're going to stand for here in the city of Dallas. We're going to weed the criminal element off our streets, there's no question about it, but then we're going to piggyback that with positivity. I will tell you this, we will take down drug houses in our neighborhoods, there's no question about it. But we also have to recognize and know that that is still traumatic to the individuals that have to live in a neighborhood like that. So we need to come and rid them of the criminal element, and then we got to come and say, hey, listen, we're here for positivity, we want to strengthen the neighborhoods. I believe in talking about, I don't use the term safer neighborhoods, I use the term stronger neighborhoods. Because safer neighborhoods will come underneath stronger neighborhoods. Because we can be as safe as we can possibly be, but I'll tell you what, I've patrolled some areas of the city, and I've seen some areas of hopelessness in the city of Dallas. And when you live in hopeless situations, you do hopeless things. And to get out of that hope in a long-term perspective, I love the fact that I came after education because I met with Dr. Hinojosa last week, and I told him we're going to be partners in this. Because you know what, long-term getting out neighborhoods, when we look at our neighborhoods of concern, because I will tell you this, if we were to look, and I'll say this, I've been here a month, a lot of things have happened in this last month, but coming from 30 years in San Jose, I'll tell you, no, things are different. I can tell you where our high crime areas in this city by a few things. Number one, where our truancy rate's the highest. Number two, where our educational scores the lowest. Number three, where is the highest levels of unemployment in our city. Okay, those three things, do they have anything to do with police work? Absolutely not. But they all have to do with public safety. We have to work with our partners in order to get us out of a long-term perspective. It was interesting. Yesterday I had a meeting with Safer Dallas. And Safer Dallas and other community groups asked, so how can we help you? And I said, whatever I need. What I need is I need some funding. Okay, because if I'm not going to get it from the federal government on a weed and seed program, I need some funding that we can do locally for my seeding part. Because we're going to take the crooks off the street. I'm going to tell you that right now. I have told my rank and file, we will be procedurally just. Okay, we will do what we have to do, but our communities need us today more than ever. I talk about an incident, there was an NPR interview out of the city of Baltimore where they interviewed after the Freddie Gray incident in the city of Baltimore. People are familiar with Freddie Gray, who died in police custody in Baltimore, and they had riots and protests that occurred shortly after. So during these things, they asked a reverend by the name of Kenji Scott that if he wanted to see less police in his neighborhoods. And Kenji Scott said, absolutely not. He said, you're hearing that from liberal politicians in the media. You're not hearing that from the neighborhood that have to deal with violent crime. As a matter of fact, 4 murders occurred since this all started. He said he hadn't seen police reform work anywhere in the country, and he hadn't seen it work in Baltimore, because he said all it did was that the police go to their corner, the community went to their corner, and there was no one in the middle keeping them safe. He went on to say eloquently enough, he said, we just wanted you to stop beating the hell out of us. We didn't want you to leave. So I tell that to rank and file wherever I'm at, that our communities that need us don't want us to leave, they want to be treated fairly, but they don't want us to go away. And so we need to build on that. We need to build on that. The fact that they don't want us to go away, the fact that in this last month I have seen so much support and positivity from the community. It's not what the national rhetoric says about communities don't want to see police, because I certainly haven't seen it here. I've seen a lot of support. But with that support, we have to treat it like a precious gift. We have to treat it like a precious gift because that does not exist in every city. It does not. And I know I've seen it here, and I can tell you it does not exist in every city. So we have to treat it like a precious gift, which is why we will be taking criminal element off the street and why we will be invigorating communities with positivity. We have a lot of plans to do that. One of the last pieces in the crime prevention plan from a long-term perspective is, yes, we're going to bring individuals in that have not yet graduated to violence, and we're going to talk to them about how we will not tolerate violence, that we will use everything in our arsenal, local, federal, to make sure that violence doesn't occur on our streets. Make sure our victims speak up to say the pain that they felt with violence in their streets. But then we walk out and then positivity comes in, because you know what? We're not going to get out of this unless people have accessibility to mental health programs, unless people have accessibility to substance abuse programs, unless we are in one of the richest areas in the country, unless we have jobs available, until the blight's taken out. We're going to hold landlords accountable. We're going to bring health care, because without any of those, we're not going to arrest our way out to a safer Dallas. We're gonna need all these cogs to come in and work together collectively for us to do that. Yes, we can't simply wait for the long term. We can't allow our kids to die. We can't be allowing our kids to die. And one other thing that I will say, we, collectively, this police department could lower the homicide rate by 100. And I will tell you this, and I will stand loud and clear. If the disparity in murders, that it's our black and brown kids that continue to get killed, continues to be where it's at, we better have the same outrage that we have today, even if we lower the homicide rate by 100. Because that disparity is what we really need to work on. Now obviously a rising tide lifts all ships, so less homicides means less, but if that disparity exists, we can't be celebrating. You know, I'll leave you with this before we open it up to questions. Listen, we're never going to get to the goal line. All right? Police work, law enforcement never gets to the goal line. So one of my favorite quotes is by the late Arthur Ashe. It says, "Success is a journey, not a destination. And in the doing is more important than the outcome itself." And so I'm here for the long haul. I'm happy to be here. I love this city. I was always going to be here one way or the other. I was either going to be sitting in one of those chairs or standing here in front of you. One of the two. But I was going to be here. Ecstatic to be here. The rank and file has been impressive to me. We're going to get to work, and we're going to get this accomplished together.
I'll start with